A new nonpartisan analysis on the Democrats' second spending bill says it could add to federal deficits. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget crunched the numbers. Monday's report finds the most recent version of the legislation is on track to increase deficits by roughly $200 billion over a decade. Moderate Democrats held up a vote on the social programs and climate change bill on Friday, saying they wanted an independent evaluation of the cost. Jennifer Shutt has been closely following all of the developments and joins me now. She's a congressional reporter with CQ Roll Call. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome. So tell us more about how this independent analysis was done. How did this watchdog group reach its conclusions?
So the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget is a well-known watchdog group in Washington, D.C. They, for years, have paid really close attention to government spending as well as government tax legislation. And so they are pretty well respected in terms of coming out with these sort of scores in terms of how much a piece of legislation on Capitol Hill would add to the debt. And so what they did is they did sort of all these behind the scenes calculations, two provisions that are in Democrats' $1.75 trillion reconciliation package right now. And what they found is that, well, some of the cost estimates from the Biden administration and congressional Democrats are relatively in line with what the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget believes this bill will do. There are a few disagreements here. And so that is where the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget came out this week and said they believe that over the 10-year budget window, that reconciliation package would add about $200 billion to the debt.
So put that into perspective for us. Obviously, $200 billion is an enormous sum of money, but over a 10-year period, and when we're talking about this kind of government spending, is it as enormous as it sounds?
It's not necessarily that large sum of money that most people think, wow, $200 billion, that's a lot of money. But in terms of the federal budget deficit every year and how much the federal government spends over the 10-year budget window, $200 billion is not a significant amount of funding. And in addition to that, this isn't the final score that we're going to see on that reconciliation package. One thing that a lot of lawmakers, particularly moderates as well as reporters, are waiting to see is that nonpartisan score from the Congressional Budget Office, some of which we'll see this week. But in terms of the full score, the full sort of cost analysis for that full package, the Congressional Budget Office doesn't yet know when that will be available.
And so how has this report, or how is this report being received on Capitol Hill? And are Democrats still waiting to hear from the Congressional Budget Office?
This has been received with sort of a grain of salt on Capitol Hill by most members. A lot of them really want to see what the Congressional Budget Office says in terms of final elements in this package and how that sort of nonpartisan congressional scorekeeper thinks that this package will impact tax revenues and federal spending during the next decade. And one really big part of that score that a lot of Democrats are going to be looking for is how much a provision to enhance Internal Revenue Service enforcement could bring in, because that's one of the things that this Committee for Responsible Federal Budget score differed with Democrats on. The Biden administration thinks that provision during the next decade will bring in about $400 billion in revenue, whereas the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget said they think it'll bring in about $125 billion. So there's a significant gulf there between those two scores on this reconciliation package. And so I know that that's something that a lot of Democrats and members of the Biden administration really want to see what the Congressional Budget Office says on that element, as well as the package as a whole.
Yeah, that is a significant disparity, but I can see how getting your arms around projected revenue is tough, right? Because there's so many unknowns in that, in that equation. So, give us some context here. How have other major pieces of legislation like the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act impacted federal deficits?
Right. So pretty much every year during this decade, the federal government has run a deficit And what that means is that the amount of money the federal government is spending is higher than the amount of revenue the federal government is bringing in through taxes, fees, and other programs. And that's just something that Republicans and Democrats, time and time again, have sort of accepted as the cost of doing business in DC, with congressional spending bills and with emergency spending legislation, like all those coronavirus relief packages that Congress approved since the pandemic began. And so the federal budget deficit has sort of gone up and down and been a little bit of a roller coaster during the last few presidential administrations. But both parties, through various pieces of legislation, like that 2017 tax bill, like the regular government funding bills, and like the COVID-19 emergency relief bills, has added to the deficit during this time, which has led to that pretty large number of the national debt.
Right. So at this stage, then, how does this new information impact the negotiations? Because, like you said, Congress is sort of taking it with a grain of salt. So is it really moving the needle for those moderate Democrats?
I think this Committee for Responsible Federal Budget Analysis has not necessarily moved the needle at all for congressional moderates, particularly in the House Democratic Caucus. I think they are sort of holding their position right now until they see more analysis from the Congressional Budget Office. But one of the things that they have been saying all along, particularly that core group of 5 House Democratic moderates, is that they want this reconciliation package to be paid for so that it will not add to the deficit or the national debt. And so if, when the Congressional Budget Office comes out with its final score, if it were to align with that Committee for Responsible Federal Budget Analysis, and the Congressional Budget Office were to say that this package would increase deficits by about $200 billion or more or substantially less, moderates would have to then decide if they want to work with their leadership and the Biden administration to continue tweaking various revenue elements of that package, or if they would say that that's an acceptable number over the course of a decade and move forward with final votes on that in the House and the Senate.
Right, absolutely. Well, Jennifer Shutt, thank you so much for breaking that down for us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.